I was 70 years old when my life split cleanly into before and after. Before, I believed I had already experienced the worst kind of loss. My husband had died nearly a decade earlier, and I had learned how to survive silence, how to drink my morning coffee alone, how to sit in a large, beautiful house that echoed in all the wrong ways. I had money more than enough, really, but I also had something that felt steady. My son. After I realized I had understood nothing. The call came on a gray morning that felt too ordinary to carry disaster. I remember I was standing by the kitchen window, watching rain gather along the glass, thinking about whether I should finally replace the old curtains. Small thoughts. Useless thoughts. Then the phone rang. There is a certain kind of silence that comes right before bad news. I felt it before I even answered. Is this Abigail? The voice was calm, professional, careful. Yes. This is Officer Daniels. I'm calling about your son. That was the moment everything inside me dropped. Not broke, just dropped, like something slipping out of your hands before you even realize you're losing it. I don't remember all the words that followed. I remember fragments.
Accident.
Highway.
Didn't survive.
I remember thanking him. Can you imagine that? Thanking him. As if he had delivered a package instead of destroying my entire world. When the call ended, I stayed standing there, still holding the phone. The rain kept falling. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, and I didn't move to turn it off. My son was gone. My only child. The boy I had raised. The man I had watched build a life filled with purpose, kindness, long hours, and quiet strength. He had become someone people respected, someone who mattered. And in a single moment, he was erased. The house felt different immediately. Not empty. Worse than that. Hollow. Like something essential had been pulled out of it, leaving behind only structure. People always assume money protects you from certain kinds of pain. It doesn't. It just gives you a nicer place to feel it. The days that followed passed like a blurred film I couldn't pause. Funeral arrangements. Phone calls. Voices speaking gently, as if I might shatter if they used the wrong tone. I heard the same phrases over and over. He was an incredible man. He helped so many people. We're so sorry. I nodded. I thanked them. I stood where I was told to stand, sat when I was told to sit, and accepted embraces from people whose faces I barely registered. Everyone talked about his work, his dedication, how he never seemed to rest. And slowly, quietly, a question began to form inside me. Had he been happy? It's a terrible thing to doubt something like that after it's too late to ask. The funeral was held in a small church not far from where he had grown up. I wore black, the same black dress I had promised myself I would never need again after my husband's funeral. Life has a way of ignoring promises. The church was full. That part surprised me, even though it shouldn't have. My son had touched more lives than I ever realized. Doctors, patients, colleagues, people whose names I had never heard, all standing there grieving him in their own way. I sat in the front row, hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to remain composed. I don't remember the entire service. I remember the sound of voices blending together, the rise and fall of a hymn, the soft echo of footsteps on the wooden floor. But mostly I remember waiting for it to feel real, waiting for something inside me to react properly. It didn't. Not yet. At the cemetery, the air felt colder than it should have for that time of year. I walked behind the casket slowly, each step heavier than the last. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a friend, held my arm to keep me steady. I didn't look at their face. I couldn't. When they lowered him into the ground, something inside me finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, irreversible fracture. This was not how life was supposed to work. Parents are not meant to bury their children. People began to leave, one by one, in small groups, offering final condolences before returning to their lives. I stayed. I didn't want to go back to that empty house. Not yet. That's when I noticed them. At first, they were just shapes in the distance near a tree. 3 small figures standing close together. Children. They were dressed in dark clothes, too formal for their age, and they stood in a way that immediately caught my attention. Not restless. Not distracted.
Still.
Focused. As the crowd thinned, they slowly approached the grave. I watched them without moving. They looked identical. 3 girls. Same height. Same dark hair. Same serious expressions that didn't belong on faces that young. Each of them held a flower. They stepped forward one by one and placed them carefully on the fresh earth, as if they understood the weight of what they were doing. There was nothing playful or curious in their movements. Only grief. That was what unsettled me. Children don't grieve like that unless they have a reason. I told myself they must have been visiting another grave, that they had nothing to do with my son, that it was coincidence. Then one of them spoke. So, quietly, I almost missed it. "Goodbye, Daddy." The word hit me harder than anything that had happened that entire day.
Daddy.
I felt the air leave my lungs. I must have made a sound, because all 3 girls turned toward me at once. Their eyes met mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Something passed between us. Recognition, fear, confusion. I couldn't tell. Then, without a word, they grabbed each other's hands and ran.
Just like that. Gone.
I stood there, frozen. My heart was pounding in a way that felt almost painful.
No.
That wasn't possible. My son didn't have children. He would have told me, wouldn't he? That night, I sat in my living room surrounded by flowers and sympathy cards, but I didn't see any of it. All I could see were those 3 faces. All I could hear was that one word, Daddy. Grief can play tricks on the mind. That's what I told myself. You imagine things. You connect dots that aren't there. You search for meaning because the truth is too empty to accept. But no matter how many times I tried to dismiss it, the memory refused to fade. The way they looked at the grave, the care in their movements, the sadness in their eyes. That wasn't imagination. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. And by morning, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I needed answers. Because if those girls were connected to my son, then everything I thought I knew about his life was incomplete. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I believed. I went back to the cemetery the next morning, earlier than I had ever woken up in years. I didn't even bother making coffee. The idea of sitting still, of doing anything ordinary, felt impossible. I needed to see if what I had witnessed the day before was real, or if grief had already begun distorting my mind. The sky was pale and quiet, that strange color between night and morning where everything feels suspended. The cemetery was almost empty. A groundskeeper worked somewhere in the distance, his movements slow and routine, completely detached from the storm inside me. I walked straight to my son's grave. Fresh earth, flowers already beginning to wilt. His name carved into stone that still looked too new, too final. I stood there for a long moment, trying to steady myself, trying to decide what exactly I was expecting to happen. Part of me hoped I wouldn't see them again, that it had been a misunderstanding, that I could return to the painful but simple reality of grief. But another part of me, stronger, louder, needed those girls to exist. Because if they were real, then my son had left something behind. Something living. Something that still connected me to him. I stayed there for nearly an hour. Nothing happened. No children.
No voices.
No sign that the moment from yesterday had ever occurred. By the time I turned to leave, I felt almost foolish. Of course it had been my imagination, a mind trying to cope with loss, creating meaning where there was none.
But still something didn't sit right.
So I came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. At first, I told myself I was just visiting him, bringing flowers, sitting near the grave, talking quietly like people sometimes do when they don't know what else to do with their grief. But that wasn't the truth. I was waiting, looking,
Hoping.
a full week passed. 7 mornings of the same quiet routine. 7 mornings of nothing. I started to feel something close to disappointment, which didn't make sense. Why would I want something so strange, so unsettling, to be real? But I did. Because the alternative was unbearable. It was on the 8th day that everything changed. I had just finished placing fresh flowers, white lilies this time, when I noticed movement near the same tree where I had first seen them. My body reacted before my mind did. I froze. 3 small figures. Again, walking slowly, together. This time, there was no doubt. They were real, and they were coming toward my son's grave. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. I was afraid that if I did, they would disappear again like some fragile illusion. As they got closer, I could see them more clearly. 3 identical girls, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Their hair was tied back neatly, their clothes simple, school uniforms this time. Navy skirts, white shirts, matching sweaters. They walked with a kind of quiet seriousness that didn't belong to children their age. Each of them carried a flower. When they reached the grave, they didn't notice me at first. They knelt slightly, placing the flowers with the same careful respect I had seen before. Red this time. Then they stood there in silence, and one of them spoke. "We miss you, Daddy." My chest tightened so sharply, I thought I might collapse. There it was again. Not imagination, not confusion, reality. I shifted slightly without meaning to. Just enough. The sound must have reached them because all 3 girls turned at once. Their eyes locked onto mine. And this time, they didn't run. They just stared. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. Curiosity. Recognition, maybe. The girl standing in the center took a small step forward. She seemed to be the one who led the others, even without speaking. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was cautious. "Are you his mom?" The question hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not, "Who are you?" Not, "What are you doing here?" But something much more direct, much more personal. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Yes. The word barely came out. "I am." The 3 girls exchanged quick glances, like they were communicating silently. Then the same girl stepped forward again. "My name is Emma," she said carefully. "And these are my sisters, Lily and Grace." I looked at each of them in turn, trying to take in every detail. Emma, the one speaking, stood straight, her expression serious beyond her years. Lily, on her right, watched me with cautious curiosity. Grace, on the left, seemed quieter, almost fragile, her hand gripping her sister's sleeve. "And we're his daughters." For a moment, the world tilted. Everything inside me tried to reject the sentence. It didn't fit. It didn't make sense. My son didn't have children. I would have known. I should have known. And yet, I looked at their faces again. And this time I saw it. Not just similarity. Not coincidence. Him. In their eyes. In the shape of their expressions. In the way Emma tilted her head slightly when she spoke. It was subtle, but undeniable. "How old are you?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to control it. 10, Emma answered. "We'll be 11 soon."
10.
That meant my mind raced backward, trying to remember that time in his life, trying to find any sign, any clue that I had missed something so enormous. But nothing surfaced. Everything had seemed normal. Too normal. "Where do you live?" I asked gently. The girls hesitated. All three of them. That hesitation told me more than any answer could have. "With our aunt," Lily said finally. "She takes care of us." Something twisted inside me. An aunt, not their mother. "Where is your mother?" I asked more softly now. Grace looked down. Emma answered instead. "She's not with us anymore." The way she said it, calm, controlled, told me everything I needed to know. Another loss. Another silence. I felt something rising in my chest. Grief, anger, confusion. Too many emotions tangled together to separate. My son had daughters. 3 of them. And I had never known. Not once in 10 years. "Did he visit you?" I asked. Emma nodded. "Every couple of weeks. Sometimes more." "He brought us books," Lily added. "And snacks," Grace said quietly. "And he told us stories," Emma finished. I closed my eyes for a brief second. There it was. A whole life. A whole part of him. Hidden. "Why didn't he tell me about you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. The girls exchanged another glance. Then Emma spoke. "He said it was complicated." Complicated. That word echoed in my head. Complicated enough to keep his own children a secret from me? Complicated enough to live a double life? Before I could ask anything else, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Emma." "Lily." "Grace." The girls stiffened instantly. All 3 of them. I turned to see a woman hurrying toward us, her expression tight with worry. And something else.
Fear.
She reached us quickly, placing herself slightly in front of the girls, as if shielding them. Her eyes moved from them to me, assessing, calculating. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm Abigail," I said. "I'm their grandmother." The word felt strange, and right at the same time. Grandmother. Her reaction was immediate. Her face paled. And in that moment I knew. She had been expecting this. Or, at least fearing it. "We need to go," she said quickly, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Wait," I said, stepping forward.
"Please."
"I just found out." "This isn't the place," she interrupted sharply. The girls looked between us, confused, tense. "Will we see you again?" Grace asked suddenly, her small voice breaking through the tension. I opened my mouth to answer, but the woman had already turned, guiding them away.
Fast.
Too fast. I stood there, watching them disappear. Again. But this time, everything was different, because now I knew. They were real. They were his. And, somehow, they were mine too. That night, I didn't feel empty. I felt something else. Something stronger. Something sharper. A need. Because grief had turned into something new. Not just loss, but truth waiting to be uncovered. And I wasn't going to stop.
Not now.
I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't because of grief alone. It was something sharper, more focused, like my mind had finally found something to hold on to. For days after my son's death, everything had felt blurred, distant, unreal. Now, suddenly, there was direction. 3 faces. 3 names. Emma, Lily, and Grace. My granddaughters. Even thinking the word felt strange, like trying on a life that should have been mine years ago. By morning, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait for chance to bring them back to me again. I had spent too many years trusting that life would reveal things when the time was right. That illusion had already cost me too much. I needed answers. And I knew exactly where to start. My son's apartment still hadn't been fully cleared out. I had avoided going back there since the funeral, telling myself I needed time, that I wasn't ready to face his absence in a place that still held his presence so strongly. But now, that hesitation felt almost selfish. If he had lived a life I didn't know about, traces of it had to be there. I arrived just after noon. The building looked the same as always, clean, quiet, impersonal in that way modern places tend to be. Nothing about it suggested that it held secrets. Nothing about it suggested that behind one of those doors, my son had lived a second life. The manager, Mr. Lewis, recognized me immediately when I stepped into the lobby. "Mrs. Abigail," he said gently, his voice lowering in that familiar tone people used around me now. "I'm very sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I replied, though the words felt automatic. I was hoping I could go up to his apartment again. "There are a few things I need to look through." He hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The apartment door felt heavier than I remembered. Or maybe it was just me. I stood there for a moment before unlocking it, bracing myself for the wave of memories I knew would hit the second I stepped inside.
They did.
Everything was exactly as he had left it. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered in the air. A jacket hung over the back of a chair. A coffee mug sat on the counter, untouched. It looked like he could walk back in at any moment. That illusion almost broke me, but I forced myself to move. I wasn't here to fall apart.
Not yet.
I started with the obvious places. Drawers.
Shelves.
The desk in the corner of the living room where he used to work late into the night. At first, everything I found matched the version of his life I had always known. Documents, bills, medical journals, neatly organized files. Nothing unusual. Nothing hidden. For a moment, doubt crept in again. What if the girls had been mistaken? What if there was some explanation I wasn't seeing? But then I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. And everything changed. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of folders, was a small box. Not locked. Not hidden particularly well. Just placed there. As if he had always known that one day, someone might open it. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was a photograph. 3 little girls. Younger than when I had seen them at the cemetery, maybe 6 or 7 years old. They were sitting on the floor, leaning into each other, all smiling at something just outside the frame. And behind the camera, I didn't need to guess. I knew that smile. I sat down slowly, the photograph still in my hands. There were more. Dozens. The girls at a park. The girls in what looked like a small kitchen, covered in flour, laughing. The girls holding books, wearing birthday hats, sitting on swings. And in some of them, him, my son, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not the polite, controlled smile he gave at family dinners or during our weekly calls. This was different. Lighter.
Real.
My chest tightened painfully. How had I missed this? How had he carried something so important, so life-changing, and never once let it slip? Beneath the photographs, there were envelopes, letters, some opened, some still sealed, all addressed in the same handwriting. I picked one up carefully. Inside was a simple note. "We miss you. Anne says you're busy, but we hope you come this weekend. Grace lost her tooth and wants to show you. Emma says she's not scared of the dark anymore. Lily says you promised pancakes."
No signature.
It didn't need one. I closed my eyes for a moment, holding the paper tightly. This wasn't a secret that had been distant or occasional. This had been his life. A real, ongoing, deeply connected life. And I had been completely outside of it. There were also receipts, medical bills, therapy appointments, names of clinics I had never heard of. The more I looked, the clearer it became. He hadn't just been visiting them. He had been supporting them,
Caring for them.
fighting for them. And he had done it all alone. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions I couldn't separate.
Pride.
Anger. Heartbreak. How could he have trusted himself to carry something this heavy alone, but not trusted me to share it with him? A soft knock at the open door pulled me out of my thoughts. I looked up to see Mr. Lewis standing there. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said carefully. "I just wanted to check if you needed anything." I hesitated for a second. Then I asked, "Did my son ever have visitors? Children?" His expression shifted slightly. Not surprised, but cautious. "There were 3 girls," he admitted after a moment. "They came by every now and then.
Always well behaved. Quiet.
And the woman with them?" I asked. He nodded.
Yes.
"Usually an older woman. She didn't stay long. They kept to themselves." "How often?" "Every couple of weeks, maybe. Sometimes he would meet them outside instead." That was enough. Enough to confirm everything. Enough to erase any remaining doubt. When I left the apartment, I wasn't the same person who had walked in. Before, I had questions. Now I had something else. Resolve. I spent the rest of the afternoon driving. Not randomly. Not aimlessly. I returned to the cemetery. Because if there was one place I knew for certain they would come back to, it was there. I waited. For hours. The sun moved slowly across the sky, shadows shifting around the gravestones. I didn't move. I didn't leave. I wasn't missing them again. And then finally, I saw it. A familiar blue car pulling into the distance. My heart began to race immediately. It was the same one. I was sure of it. I stepped out of my own car slowly, carefully, trying not to draw too much attention. The door of the blue car opened. The woman stepped out first. Then the girls.
Emma.
Lily.
Grace.
This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked toward them. Steady.
Certain.
The woman saw me immediately. Her expression hardened. Protective. Guarded. "We need to talk," I said. Not a question. Not a request. A decision. The girls looked between us again, their small faces filled with confusion and something else now. Hope. The woman exhaled slowly, as if she had been expecting this moment from the very beginning. "Not here," she said finally. Then, after a pause, "There's a place nearby. A small cafe." She looked at me directly. "If you want answers, we can talk there." I nodded, because this was it. The moment everything would start to make sense, or fall apart even more. As we walked back toward our cars, I felt something unfamiliar rising inside me. Not just determination, not just grief. Something stronger. Something that hadn't existed in my life for a very long time. A reason to move forward. Because whatever the truth was, those girls were part of my son. And that meant they were part of me. The cafe was small, almost hidden between 2 larger buildings, the kind of place people pass every day without noticing. Inside, it smelled like coffee and warm bread, and for a moment the normalcy of it felt almost unreal compared to everything that had happened over the past few days. People sat at tables talking quietly. Someone laughed near the window. Cups clinked softly against saucers. Life continuing, indifferent to everything I had just discovered. We took a table in the corner. The woman sat across from me, the 3 girls sliding in beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I noticed immediately how they stayed near her, instinctively, like they were used to staying together, like separation, even small, felt unsafe. Emma sat in the middle again, just like before, her posture straight, her eyes watching everything. Lily leaned slightly toward her, and Grace rested quietly against her sister's arm, her movements softer, slower. "I'm Abigail," I said, though she already knew. "I know," the woman replied. Her voice was steady, but there was tension underneath it.
"I'm Claire."
She didn't offer more than that. I nodded. "Their aunt." "Yes." A waitress came by, and for a moment we all fell silent while drinks were ordered. The girls chose hot chocolate. Claire asked for coffee. I didn't want anything but ordered tea anyway just to have something to hold. As soon as the waitress left, the silence returned. But this time it was heavier, filled with everything that hadn't been said yet. I went to his apartment, I said finally. Claire's eyes flickered. You found the box. It wasn't a question. I nodded. So you know. I know enough to understand that my son had 3 daughters, I replied, my voice calm but firm, and that he kept them a secret from me for 10 years. The words hung between us. The girls shifted slightly, clearly aware that something serious was being discussed, even if they didn't understand all of it. Claire exhaled slowly, looking down at her hands for a moment before meeting my eyes again. He didn't do it to hurt you. Then why? I asked, sharper than I intended. The question wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about everything, about trust, about all the years I had believed I knew my own son. Claire hesitated, and I saw it, the internal conflict. What to say, what not to say, what I had a right to know. Because things weren't simple, she said finally. Complicated, I repeated, the word Emma had used earlier. That's what he told them too. Claire gave a small, tired smile. That sounds like him. The drinks arrived, giving us a brief pause. The girls wrapped their hands around their cups, the warmth clearly comforting. Grace leaned slightly into Lily again, and I noticed something subtle, something I hadn't paid attention to before. She seemed weaker. Not obviously, but enough. Enough that it stayed in my mind. Where is their mother? I asked quietly. Claire's expression changed immediately. The tension deepened. She died, she said. The words were simple, but the weight behind them wasn't. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Claire nodded once, but didn't elaborate. I understood that silence. Some stories aren't easy to tell, especially not to strangers, even if those strangers are suddenly family. How did my son meet her? I asked. They met years ago, Claire said. Before the girls were born. It wasn't a stable situation, but he cared about her. And when the girls came, he stepped in. Stepped in? I repeated. He took responsibility, she said more firmly. Even without everything else being official. Everything else. Marriage. A shared life. Things that would have made this visible. Understandable. I leaned back slightly, trying to process it all. He supported them. Yes. Financially. Yes. And he visited them. Every chance he could. The answers came quickly now.
No hesitación. No denial.
Why didn't he bring them to me? I asked again, softer this time. Claire looked at the girls, then back at me. Because he didn't think you could handle it. The words landed hard. I lost my husband, I said quietly. Not my ability to love. I know, Claire replied. But he didn't. That hurt more than anything else. Not the secrecy. Not the years lost. But that my own son had believed I was too fragile to accept his children. He thought, Claire continued slowly, choosing her words carefully, that adding 3 young girls, especially with everything going on, would be too much for you. With everything going on? I asked, my attention sharpening. Claire hesitated again. The girls were listening now, quietly, their eyes moving between us. Some things are complicated, she repeated. I leaned forward slightly. No, I said. Not anymore. Not for me. There was a long pause. Then Claire sighed, as if something inside her had finally given way. The girls have a medical condition, she said. My stomach tightened. What kind of condition? It affects the muscles, she explained. It gets worse over time. Slowly, but it progresses. I looked at the girls again. At Grace, especially. At the way she leaned. At the quiet effort in her movements. Do all of them have it?
I asked.
Claire shook her head.
No.
Only Lily and Grace. I felt something inside me drop again.
2 of them.
2 children. They need regular treatment, Claire continued. Therapy. Monitoring. It's expensive, time-consuming, and it doesn't just affect them physically, it affects everything. And my son knew. Yes. And he handled it alone. Yes. The pieces were coming together now. The late nights, the constant work, the quiet exhaustion I had noticed, but never questioned deeply enough. He was trying to protect you, Claire said. From what?
I asked.
From this, she replied simply. I looked down at my hands, at how steady they appeared despite everything. I would have helped, I said quietly. I know that now, Claire replied. But he didn't. The silence that followed was different. Not hostile, not tense, just heavy with truth. Are you angry? Emma asked suddenly. Her voice cut through everything. I looked at her, really looked this time, at how strong she was trying to be, at how much she was already carrying. Yes, I admitted. Not at you, I added quickly. Then who? Lily asked. I hesitated, then answered honestly. At time, I said. At all the years we didn't have. Grace shifted slightly, then asked in a small voice, Do you not like us? The question hit harder than anything else in that conversation. I leaned forward immediately. No, I said, my voice firm. That's not it at all.
Then what is it? She asked.
I swallowed, trying to find the right words. I'm trying to understand how I didn't know about 3 of the most important people in my son's life, I said softly. And how I can make up for that now. The girls exchanged a look. Then Emma spoke again. Are you going to disappear too? Claire closed her eyes briefly. I felt something tighten in my chest. Disappear. That wasn't just a question. That was fear. Real, lived fear. No, I said, without hesitation, without doubt. I'm not going anywhere. Emma studied my face carefully, as if trying to decide whether to believe me. After a moment, she nodded slightly. Claire leaned back in her chair, watching this exchange with a complicated expression. You don't know what you're stepping into, she said quietly. I know enough, I replied. No, she said. You know the idea of it, not the reality. She wasn't wrong, but that didn't change anything. Then show me, I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What? Show me the reality, I repeated. Let me understand. Let me be part of it. Another long silence. The kind where decisions are made, without words. Finally, Claire sighed. Not all at once, she said. Not quickly. That's fine. And the girls come first. Always. Of course. She studied me one last time, then nodded. All right, she said. We'll try. The word felt small compared to everything it represented, but it was enough. More than enough. As we stood to leave, Grace slipped her hand into mine. It was such a small gesture, but it changed everything. For the first time since my son died, I didn't feel completely lost, because now I wasn't just holding on to his memory. I was holding on to something he had left behind. Something alive. Something real. And I wasn't going to let it go. The first time I went to their house, I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes before getting out. It wasn't fear exactly, but something close to it. A quiet awareness that once I stepped through that door, nothing in my life would ever return to what it had been before. I had already crossed a line the moment I spoke to them at the cemetery, but this felt different. This felt permanent. Their house was small, modest, the kind of place that doesn't try to impress anyone but quietly holds a life together. The garden in front was simple but cared for, flowers planted in uneven rows, a small bench near the window. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. That was the first thing I noticed. Claire opened the door before I even knocked, as if she had been watching for me.
"You're on time," she said.
I didn't want to keep them waiting, I replied. That was true. It surprised me how much that was true. She stepped aside to let me in. The air inside smelled faintly of something sweet, maybe baked earlier that day. The house was clean, but not in a rigid, untouched way. It felt lived in. Real. "Girls," Claire called. "Abigail is here." There was a brief pause, then the sound of footsteps. Emma appeared first, just like she always seemed to do. There was something about her. Steady, composed, already carrying more responsibility than a child should. Lily followed close behind, her eyes curious but cautious. Grace came last, slower, one hand brushing lightly along the wall as she walked, as if grounding herself.
"Hi," Emma said.
"Hello," I replied, suddenly aware that I had no idea what the proper way to greet grandchildren you had just discovered existed was. Grace solved that problem for me. She walked straight up and hugged me.
"No hesitation."
No questions. Just trust. It caught me off guard, so completely that for a second I didn't move. Then I wrapped my arms around her gently, feeling how light she was, how careful I needed to be. "You came back," she said softly. "I told you I would," I answered. And I meant it. We moved into the living room, where everything felt small but warm. There were drawings taped to the walls, bright, messy, full of color. School books stacked neatly on a side table. A worn couch that had clearly been used for everything from homework to naps. "This is where we watch movies," Lily said, pointing proudly. "And argue about which one," Emma added. "I don't argue," Grace said quietly. "You do," both of her sisters said at the same time. I couldn't help it, I smiled. It was such a simple moment, but it felt like stepping into something I had missed for years. Claire stayed nearby, not hovering exactly, but watching, observing. I understood why. Trust wasn't something you offered easily when you had spent years holding everything together alone. "We made something for you," Lily said suddenly. Before I could respond, she ran off and came back with a small, handmade book. It was held together with string, the pages slightly uneven. "It's about us," she explained, handing it to me. I took it carefully, opening to the first page. Crayon drawings. 3 little girls holding hands. A man beside them. "Daddy," Emma said quietly. I turned the page. More drawings. Different moments. Birthdays.
"Parks."
A kitchen covered in flour. "He always made pancakes on Sundays," Grace added. I paused on one drawing. It showed the 3 girls, Claire, and an empty space. "That's where you go," Lily said matter-of-factly. My heart tightened. "You didn't know how to draw me yet," I said softly. Emma shook her head.
"No."
"Daddy said we'd meet you one day." I closed the book for a moment, steadying myself. That was the second time I had heard that. He had planned for this. Not fully, not openly, but somewhere in the back of his mind, he had believed this would happen. "Do you want to see more?" Grace asked. "Yes," I said immediately. Claire brought out a box of photographs, different from the ones I had found. These were theirs. The girls sat close to me as we went through them. I saw my son in a way I never had before, not just as a doctor, not just as a son, but as a father. He looked different, lighter,
Happier.
more complete. It hurt to realize that part of him had existed without me. But it also filled something in me I hadn't known was empty. "He told really good stories," Lily said. "The best ones," Grace added. Emma nodded. "And he always made us finish them ourselves." "Why?" I asked. "So we'd learn how to think," Emma said. That sounded exactly like him. As the afternoon went on, I began to notice more things. Small things. Important things. Grace got tired quickly. She leaned against me more often, as if sitting upright for too long required effort. Lily's hands trembled slightly when she concentrated on something detailed. Emma watched both of them constantly, adjusting without drawing attention to it. Helping. Always helping. Claire noticed me noticing. It's subtle at first, she said quietly when the girls moved into the kitchen for a moment. How long? I asked. Years, she replied. It progresses slowly. But it doesn't stop. And you've been managing this alone? Yes. I looked around the house again, at the signs of effort, of sacrifice, of quiet strength. They deserve more, I said. Claire's expression tightened slightly. They have everything I can give them. I know, I said quickly. And it's incredible. But it shouldn't all be on you. She didn't respond right away. But she didn't argue either. The girls returned, carrying a plate of slightly uneven cookies. We made these, Grace said proudly. They're a little burnt, Lily admitted. They're perfect, I said, taking one. And they were. Not because of how they tasted, but because of what they were. Later, as the sun began to set, I found myself sitting on the couch with Grace asleep against me, her breathing soft and steady. Emma and Lily sat on the floor nearby, arguing quietly over something in a book. Claire stood in the doorway, watching us. This is hard for me, she said after a while. I know, I replied. I've been everything for them, she continued. For a long time. I'm not trying to replace you, I said. I know, she said again. She hesitated, then added quietly, I'm just not used to sharing them. I looked down at Grace, then back at her. I'm not here to take anything away, I said. Only to add. That seemed to settle something, even if only slightly. When it was time to leave, the girls walked me to the door. Will you come again? Lily asked. Yes. When? Emma asked. Soon, I said. Grace looked up at me. Promise. I knelt down so I was at her level. I promise. As I drove home, something inside me had shifted completely. My house still felt big, still quiet, still empty in many ways. But not the same kind of empty, because now I knew something. I wasn't alone. Not really. Not anymore. And for the first time since I lost my son, I felt something that wasn't just grief. It was fragile, uncertain, but real. Hope. 3 weeks changed everything. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but slowly, steadily, like something settling into place after being loose for too long. I began to see the girls regularly, sometimes at their house, sometimes taking them out for small things like ice cream or a walk in the park. Nothing overwhelming. Claire insisted on that, and I understood. Trust wasn't built in a single moment. It had to be earned in quiet, consistent ways. But the more time I spent with them, the more I realized something that unsettled me deeply. This wasn't just about getting to know my granddaughters. This was about understanding how much they were carrying. The first time I went with them to a medical appointment, I didn't know what to expect. Claire had mentioned therapy sessions before, but hearing about something and seeing it are two completely different things. The clinic was clean, professional, filled with the usual neutral colors that try to make medical spaces feel less intimidating. It didn't work. Not really. Hope. I had started calling Lily by her middle name, because that's what Claire used in medical settings, sat quietly beside Grace, both of them waiting with a calmness that didn't belong to children their age. Emma sat between them again, her posture alert, her eyes moving constantly, watching everything. You don't have to stay, Claire told me quietly. It can be a lot the first time. I'm not going anywhere, I said. And again, I meant it. When they called their names, we followed a therapist into a long room filled with equipment that looked more suited for a gym than for children. Okay, girls, the therapist said gently. Let's start slow today. Slow. That word stayed with me. At first, the exercises didn't look like much. Simple movements, stretching, walking short distances. But the effort behind them, that was something else entirely. Grace struggled first. Her steps were careful, deliberate, each one requiring focus. Hope pushed herself harder, jaw set, refusing to show any sign of weakness even when it was obvious she was tiring. Emma stayed close, not participating but not leaving either. She watched everything, ready to step in if needed. It was instinct for her, not something she had been taught, something she had become. I stood there, watching, feeling something build inside me. Not just sadness, not just anger, something stronger, a kind of fierce, protective determination that I hadn't felt in years. How long have they been doing this? I asked Claire quietly. Since the first signs appeared, she replied. Years now. And it helps. It slows things down, she said. Sometimes. Sometimes. That word was worse than anything else. Grace stumbled slightly during one of the exercises. It wasn't a fall. Not quite. But enough. Emma was there immediately, steadying her. I'm okay, Grace said quickly, as if she needed to convince all of us. I know, Emma replied, but she didn't let go right away. I turned away for a moment, just for a second, because seeing children adapt so naturally to something so unfair was almost too much. After the session, the girls were quieter, tired. Even Emma. Claire handled everything with practiced efficiency, appointments, notes, scheduling the next visit. She moved like someone who had done this 100 times. 1,000 times. Alone. In the car, Grace leaned her head against my shoulder. Does it get easier? She asked softly. I hesitated, then answered honestly. Some things don't get easier, I said. But you get stronger. She seemed to think about that, then nodded. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the therapy, about the effort, about the cost, not just financially, but emotionally, physically, constantly. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Claire. We need to talk, I said. There was a pause on the other end. About what? About not doing this alone anymore. She didn't respond immediately. I'll come by, I added. When I arrived, the girls were at school. It was just the two of us. That made it easier. And harder. Claire stood in the kitchen, arms crossed slightly, already defensive. I told you, she said. We're managing. I know, I replied. That's the problem. She frowned. What does that mean? It means you're surviving, I said. Not living. That hit. I could see it. I don't have a choice, she said. Yes, you do. No, she said more sharply. I don't. This is what their life is. This is what my life is. I stepped closer, not aggressively, but firmly. It doesn't have to be like this, I said. Her expression shifted. Suspicion. Fear. Hope, maybe. All at once. What are you saying? She asked carefully. I'm saying I can help, I said. Financially, yes, she replied quickly. But that's not the whole picture. I know, I said. I'm not talking about just money. She blinked, then waited. I want to be part of their lives, I continued. Fully. Not as someone who visits, not as someone on the outside. That's not simple, she said. I know. There was a long silence. You don't understand what that means, she said finally. Then explain it to me, I replied. She exhaled slowly. It means hospital visits. It means bad days. It means fear you can't fix. It means watching them struggle and not being able to stop it. I know, I said. No, she said again. You know the idea of it, not the reality. I stepped closer. Then let me learn the reality, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Really looked. as if trying to decide whether I was serious, whether I would stay, whether I would break. What if it becomes too much for you? She asked quietly. It won't. You don't know that.
Ido.
She shook her head slightly. People always think they can handle things like this, she said. Until they can't. I felt something rise in me. Not anger. Something steadier. I've already lost everything that mattered most to me, I said quietly. Do you really think I'm going to walk away from the only part of him I have left? That stopped her. Her expression softened. Just a little. And if you change your mind, she asked. I won't. Another silence. Longer this time. Finally, she looked away, then back at me. You'd have to commit, she said. Not halfway. Not temporarily. I know. And the girls come first. Always. Always. She nodded slowly, as if making a decision she had been avoiding for years. Okay, she said. Just one word. But it changed everything. That afternoon, when the girls came home, something felt different. They sensed it immediately. Children always do. What happened? Emma asked, looking between us. Claire glanced at me, then back at them. Things are going to change a little, she said. Grace looked up at me. Good change, she asked. I smiled. Yes, I said. Good change. And for the first time since all of this began, it didn't feel like I was stepping into their world. It felt like we were beginning to build one together. The decision didn't feel real at first. Even after Claire said yes, even after we agreed to move forward together, there was still a part of me that expected something to interrupt it, some complication, some hidden truth, something that would make everything fall apart again. Maybe it was because for weeks, every new discovery had come with a shock attached to it. But this felt different. This felt like the beginning of something that had been delayed for far too long. And yet, the reality of it arrived quickly. Much faster than I expected. The next medical appointment changed everything. I went with them again, this time not as a visitor, not as someone observing from the outside, but as part of the conversation. Claire didn't stop me from asking questions anymore. She didn't shield me from details. That alone told me how much had shifted between us. The doctor, a calm, middle-aged woman with careful eyes, reviewed test results while the girls sat nearby. Emma held Grace's hand without even thinking about it. Hope leaned back slightly, already conserving energy before anything had even begun. I want to talk about progression, the doctor said. That word again. Progression. It echoed in the room like something none of us wanted to hear, but all of us already understood. The condition is advancing a little faster than we initially expected, she continued. Not dramatically, but enough that we need to consider additional options. Claire's hand tightened slightly in her lap. What kind of options? She asked. There's a specialized treatment program, the doctor said. It's intensive. It requires time, relocation for a while, and a lot of commitment. But it has shown promising results in slowing, sometimes even stabilizing, the condition. I felt my focus sharpen instantly. Where? I asked. The doctor looked at me briefly, then answered. A research center in another city. They have a program specifically for children with this type of condition. How long?
Claire asked.
Several months at minimum, the doctor replied. Possibly longer depending on how they respond. The room went quiet. Even the girls seemed to sense the weight of what was being discussed. What happens if they don't do it? I asked. The doctor didn't hesitate. The condition will continue to progress, she said. Over time, mobility will become more limited. The timeline varies, but it won't improve on its own. Grace shifted closer to Emma. Hope stared down at her hands. Emma didn't move at all. And with the treatment? I pressed. There's no guarantee, the doctor said carefully. But the outcomes so far have been encouraging. It could significantly improve their quality of life long term. Claire closed her eyes briefly. I can't just leave everything for months, she said. I have work. I have. We would figure it out, I said. She turned to me immediately. It's not that simple. I know it's not, I replied. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. The doctor watched us quietly, then added, the program covers a portion of the medical costs. But there are still logistical challenges. Housing, time, support. I didn't need to think. I'll handle that, I said. Claire shook her head almost immediately.
No.
I looked at her. Yes. This isn't just about money, she said, her voice low but firm. This is about everything. Their routines, their stability, their lives. And their future, I replied. The words landed between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. The girls were listening now.
Completely.
Are we talking about us? Grace asked quietly. Claire looked at her, then at me. Yes, she said gently. Are we going to get worse?
Hope asked.
The question was simple, but it cut deeper than anything else in that room. I moved closer to them. We're talking about making sure that doesn't happen as much as possible, I said. Emma looked at me, not like a child, like someone evaluating a decision. Would we have to go away? She asked. Yes, the doctor said. But not alone. Emma's gaze shifted to Claire, then back to me. You'd come too? Grace asked. I didn't hesitate. Of course. Claire looked at me again, this time not with resistance, but with something closer to disbelief. You don't even know what you're offering, she said quietly.
You don't, he replied.
No, she said. You know what it sounds like, not what it is. I stepped closer. I know it means being there every day, I said. For everything. The good days and the bad ones. I know it means responsibility. I know it means not walking away. She searched my face, looking for doubt, looking for hesitation. She didn't find any. And if it gets harder than you expect? She asked. It will, I said. That answer surprised her. But I'm not afraid of hard, I continued. I'm afraid of regret. The room went silent again. Emma reached for Hope's hand. Grace leaned into both of them. What do you think? Claire asked them softly. The three girls looked at each other. That silent communication again. That bond they had built through everything. If it helps us stay stronger, Hope said. We should do it, Grace added. Emma was the last to speak. She looked at Claire, then at me. Only if we all stay together, she said. There it was. The real condition. Not medical. Not logistical. Emotional. We will, I said. Claire exhaled slowly. I could see it. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight she had been carrying for years, and the possibility of finally not carrying it alone. This changes everything, she said. It already has, I replied. That was the moment. Not when the doctor explained the treatment. Not when I offered to help. But when Claire finally nodded. Okay, she said. Just like before. One word. But it shifted the future. Later that evening, after we returned home, the girls were quieter than usual. Not sad. Just thinking. Processing. Grace sat next to me on the couch. Are you sure? She asked softly. I looked at her, at how small she still was, at how much she had already faced. Yes, I said. Even if it's hard, she asked. Especially then. She nodded slowly, then leaned against me. Emma stood nearby, watching, still evaluating, still protecting. You won't leave? She asked. I met her gaze directly.
No.
She held my eyes for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded. That night, as I drove home, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully understand before. My life hadn't just changed. It had been replaced. The quiet house, the empty routines, the long, meaningless days. They were gone. In their place was something else. Something complicated. demanding, uncertain, but also
full.
For the first time in years, I wasn't wondering what tomorrow would look like. I already knew. It would be difficult. It would be exhausting. It would be nothing like the life I had before. And I wanted it anyway, because this wasn't just about helping them. This was about becoming part of something I should have been part of all along. A family. 18 months later, I sometimes struggled to remember what my life had looked like before all of this began. Not because it had been so long, but because it no longer felt like it belonged to me. That quiet house, the carefully structured days, the silence that once stretched endlessly from morning to night, it all felt like a distant version of myself, someone I used to be, but no longer understood. Now, everything was different, and it had started the moment we said yes. The move had been chaotic. There was no other word for it. Packing up lives, arranging temporary housing near the treatment center, organizing schedules, medical records, school transitions, it felt overwhelming at first. Even with resources, even with planning, the sheer scale of change hit all of us in ways we hadn't expected. Claire struggled with letting go of control. I struggled with stepping into it. The girls, they adapted faster than either of us. Not because it was easy, but because they were used to adjusting. That realization stayed with me longer than anything else. The treatment itself was everything the doctor had warned us about. Intensive, demanding, unpredictable. There were days when Hope and Grace could barely get out of bed after sessions. Days when the medication made them nauseous, exhausted, irritable. Days when progress felt invisible, when it seemed like we were pushing forward without actually moving. And then there were other days. Small victories. Hope standing a little longer without support. Grace walking a few extra steps without stopping. Moments that might not have meant anything to anyone else, but meant everything to us. Emma handled it in her own way. She wasn't the one undergoing treatment, but that didn't make it easier for her. In some ways, it made it harder. She watched everything, not just what her sisters were going through, but how Claire and I responded to it. She carried responsibility in silence. Too much of it. I noticed it early. The way she stayed alert even when she should have been resting. The way she stepped in before anyone asked. The way she tried to be strong so no one else had to be. One evening, about 3 months into the program, I found her sitting alone in the small living room we had rented. The lights were off, the only glow coming from the street outside. "You should be asleep," I said gently. She didn't look up. "I'm not tired." That was a lie. I could hear it in her voice.
You sat beside her.
For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, very quietly, "What if it doesn't work?" The question hung in the darkness. Not dramatic, not emotional.
Just honest.
I didn't answer immediately, because she deserved more than a quick reassurance. "I don't know," I said finally. She nodded. She had expected that. "But I do know this," I continued. "They're not going through this alone. And neither are you." That made her look at me. Really look. "I'm not the one who's sick," she said.
No, irraplia.
"But you're the one holding everything together when they feel like they can't." Her expression shifted slightly. Something softer. Something uncertain. "You're allowed to be tired too," I added. She didn't say anything after that, but she leaned slightly closer. And for Emma, that meant everything. Months passed, slowly, relentlessly, but something changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but undeniably. Hope's condition stabilized. The progression slowed, then stopped. Her strength, small as it was, began to hold steady. Grace's improvement was slower, more fragile, but it was there, step by step. Literally. The doctors called it promising. We called it everything. The house we eventually moved into after the program ended wasn't large or impressive, but it was ours. Not in ownership at first, but in feeling. It had enough space for everyone, enough light, enough warmth to hold the life we had built together. The girls chose their own rooms. Emma picked the one closest to the others. Of course she did. Hope chose the one with the best window light for reading, she said. Grace picked the smallest one. Less walking, she explained simply. Claire found work at the hospital. Something that allowed her to use everything she had learned over the years, the systems, the paperwork, the endless battles with insurance and appointments, to help other families who were just beginning their own difficult journeys. I watched her change too. The constant tension she had carried began to ease. Not completely, but enough. And me? I became something I never expected. Not just a grandmother. Something more active, more present, more necessary. My days were no longer quiet. They were full. School schedules, therapy follow-ups, cooking meals for 4 growing girls and 1 very tired adult. Late-night conversations, early morning routines, arguments over homework, laughter over nothing.
Life.
Real life. One evening, we all sat around the kitchen table arguing about something completely ridiculous, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Emma was firmly against it. Hope defended it with surprising intensity. Grace just wanted extra cheese no matter what. Claire stayed neutral. I pretended to be. At some point, I stopped listening to the argument and just watched them. All of them. Together.
Alive. Growing.
Still facing challenges, yes. But not defined by them. Why are you smiling like that? Grace asked suddenly. Like what? I said. Like you're thinking something important, Hope added. I considered the question. Then answered honestly. I was just thinking about how much I love this, I said. This? Emma asked. All of it, I replied. The noise, the chaos, the questions, the responsibility, the uncertainty, everything. Because for the first time in a long time, my life felt complete. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone for a moment. Not in emptiness, but in quiet reflection. A kind of silence that no longer felt heavy but full. I thought about my son, about the choices he had made, the secrets he had kept, the reasons behind them. I understood now. Not everything, but enough. He hadn't kept them from me out of distance. He had done it out of fear, out of love, out of a belief that he was protecting everyone. He had been wrong about one thing. I could have handled it. I would have. But he had been absolutely right about something else. These girls were worth everything. And somehow, despite everything that had been lost, I had found them. Or maybe they had found me. And together, we had built something neither of us had expected. A family. Not perfect. Not simple. But real. And that was more than enough.